On the morning of June 14, 2025, Minnesota was shaken by a horrific act of violence that targeted two prominent Democratic state lawmakers, Representative Melissa Hortman and Senator John Hoffman, along with their spouses. Described by Governor Tim Walz as a politically motivated assassination, the attacks left Hortman and her husband, Mark, dead, while Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, were seriously injured but survived. The suspect, identified as 57-year-old Vance Luther Boelter, allegedly impersonated a police officer to gain access to the victims' homes, sparking a massive manhunt across the Minneapolis suburbs of Brooklyn Park and Champlin. The incident, which involved a manifesto and a list of potential targets, has raised alarm about the rising tide of political violence in the United States, prompting widespread condemnation and reflection on the state of democracy. This account provides an in-depth exploration of the events, the individuals involved, the investigation, and the broader context of political violence, drawing on available reports and critical analysis to present a thorough understanding of this tragic episode, the incident, timeline and details. Early morning attacks in Champlin and Brooklyn Park. The attacks unfolded in the early hours of Saturday, June 14, 2025, in two neighboring cities north of Minneapolis, Champlin and Brooklyn Park. According to authorities, the suspect, Vance Luther Boelter, executed a calculated plan, posing as a law enforcement officer to gain entry to the victims' homes. The timeline, as reconstructed from multiple sources, is as follows: 2:00 a.m., shooting at Senator John Hoffman's home in Champlin. Police received a 911 call reporting gunfire at the residence of State Senator John Hoffman in Champlin, a suburb approximately 15 miles northwest of Minneapolis. Hoffman, 60, and his wife, Yvette, were both shot multiple times. According to a nephew's social media post, each was struck 5 or 6 times, though both survived the initial attack. Emergency responders provided life-saving measures at the scene, and the couple was rushed to Mercy Hospital in Coon Rapids, where they underwent surgery. Governor Walz later reported that both were out of surgery and in stable condition, expressing cautious optimism about their recovery. Notably, a family member stated that Yvette Hoffman heroically threw herself in front of their daughter, Hope, to protect her during the attack. 3:35 a.m., shooting at Representative Melissa Hortman's home in Brooklyn Park. After the attack on the Hoffmans, Brooklyn Park police, alerted by the earlier shooting and aware of the victim's status as lawmakers, proactively checked on other elected officials in the area, including Representative Melissa Hortman. At approximately 3:35 a.m., officers arrived at Hortman's home in Brooklyn Park, about 9 miles from Champlin, near the Edinburgh Golf Course. They encountered a vehicle resembling a police SUV, complete with emergency lights, parked in the driveway. A man, later identified as Boelter, was exiting the home, dressed in a blue shirt, blue pants, and a black tactical vest with a fake badge and equipped with a taser. When confronted, Boelter immediately opened fire on the officers, who returned fire. The suspect retreated into the house and escaped out the back door on foot, eluding capture. Inside the home, police found Melissa Hortman, 55, dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Her husband, Mark, also shot multiple times, was pronounced dead at North Memorial Health Hospital in Robbinsdale. Immediate response and manhunt. The shootings triggered an immediate and extensive response from local, state, and federal law enforcement. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA, led by Superintendent Drew Evans, took charge of the investigation, with assistance from the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, the U.S. Marshals Service, and local agencies such as the Brooklyn Park Police and Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. Hundreds of officers, including SWAT teams, were deployed across the Minneapolis suburbs, setting up checkpoints and conducting door-to-door searches. A shelter-in-place order was issued for a 3-mile radius around the Edinburgh Golf Course in Brooklyn Park, affecting thousands of residents. This order was lifted later that afternoon when authorities determined that Boelter was likely no longer in the area. However, the suspect remained at large, prompting the FBI to place him on its most wanted list and offer a $50,000 reward for information leading to his arrest and conviction. Boelter was described as a 57-year-old white male, 6 feet 1 inch tall, weighing 220 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Authorities noted he might be wearing a light-colored cowboy hat, a dark long-sleeved collared shirt or coat, light pants, and carrying a dark bag. He was considered armed and dangerous, with police recovering AK-style firearms from his vehicle, though he was believed to still possess a pistol. Evidence found at the scene. Investigators discovered critical evidence in the suspect's vehicle, which appeared to be a modified SUV designed to resemble a police vehicle. The vehicle contained a manifesto and target list. A document described as a manifesto listed the names of dozens of individuals, including Hortman, Hoffman, Governor Tim Walz, U.S. Senator Tina Smith, other Minnesota lawmakers, abortion providers, and abortion rights advocates. The list suggested a broader scope of intended targets, raising concerns about further attacks. No Kings flyers. Authorities found a stack of flyers with the phrase, "No Kings," which led the Minnesota State Patrol to urge residents to avoid planned, "No Kings" protests across the state out of caution, despite no direct evidence that the protests were targeted. Organizers subsequently canceled all demonstrations. A Father's Day card, a card addressed to the suspect, was also found, though its significance was not publicly detailed. The discovery of the manifesto and target list heightened fears of politically motivated violence, prompting increased security measures for elected officials and others potentially at risk. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey confirmed that additional police resources were deployed to protect public officials. The victims, Melissa Hortman, Mark Hortman, John Hoffman, and Yvette Hoffman. Melissa Hortman, a dedicated public servant. Melissa Hortman, née Halupsak, was a 55-year-old Democratic state representative who had served Minnesota House District 34B, covering parts of Brooklyn Park, Coon Rapids, and Champlin, since 2004. A lawyer by training, she was a prominent figure in Minnesota politics, serving as House Speaker from 2019 to 2025 and as the Democratic Farmer Labor (DFL) Party's House Leader. Known for her grace, compassion, and tireless dedication, Hortman was a key figure in advancing progressive legislation, including women's rights. She championed expanded abortion rights, particularly during the 2023 legislative session when Democrats held a slim majority. Criminal justice reform, following the 2020 killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Hortman advocated for policing reforms, successfully pushing for a state ban on police chokeholds, education and social programs. She led efforts to secure free school lunches for children and supported investments in K-12 and higher education. Environmental policy. Hortman was active in promoting clean energy initiatives, reflecting her commitment to environmental sustainability. Hortman's political career began after earning a BA in political science and philosophy from Boston University, followed by a law degree from the University of Minnesota in 1995. She briefly interned for then-Senators Al Gore and John Kerry, an experience that shaped her commitment to public service. She later earned a master's in public administration from Harvard University in 2018. Outside politics, she volunteered on the local school board and at St. Timothy Catholic Church in Blaine. Hortman was married to Mark Hortman for 31 years, and they had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Mark, 58, worked as a program manager for Nvent Electric, a company specializing in green electronics. He was known for his light-hearted social media posts, including anecdotes about teaching their dog to ring the doorbell to play. The couple attended the DFL's annual Humphrey Mondale dinner in Minneapolis the evening before the attack, which coincided with the birthday of Melissa's father, adding a poignant layer of tragedy. Her sister, Lisa Jean Halupsak, expressed the family's devastation, stating, "We love them dearly. They will be missed. It's a horrible thing. I hope they catch him." John Hoffman, a resilient leader. State Senator John Hoffman, 60, represented Minnesota Senate District 34, encompassing Rogers, Dayton, Champlin, and parts of Brooklyn Park and Coon Rapids. Elected in 2012 and re-elected 3 times, Hoffman was a Democrat who chaired the Senate Human Services Committee and served on committees related to energy, environment, and health. A Wyoming native, he earned a bachelor's degree from St. Mary's University and had a background in marketing, public relations, and nonprofit work, including co-founding Consumer Credit of Minnesota. He also served on the Anoka-Hennepin School Board starting in 2005. Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, have a daughter, Hope. During the attack, Yvette's bravery in shielding their daughter was highlighted by family members, underscoring the personal toll of the violence. Both John and Yvette underwent surgery and were reported to be in stable condition, with Governor Walz expressing hope for their recovery. Hoffman's resilience and commitment to public service made him a respected figure in Minnesota politics, and his survival offered a glimmer of hope amid the tragedy. The suspect, Vance Luther Boelter. Background and ties to Minnesota politics. Vance Luther Boelter, 57, was identified as the suspect in the shootings. Described as a white male, 6 feet 1 inch, 220 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes, Boelter had ties to Minnesota's political and public service spheres, which added complexity to the investigation. He was appointed to the state's bipartisan Governor's Workforce Development Board in 2016 by then-Governor Mark Dayton and reappointed in 2019 by Governor Tim Walz, serving until his term expired in January 2023. He served alongside Senator Hoffman on this board, though authorities were still investigating whether they had a personal connection. Boelter's background included an extensive and eclectic resume, with experience in private security and military training, according to reports. He was described as having visited international hotspots, though specifics were not provided. His online presence suggested a familiarity with security protocols, which may have informed his ability to impersonate a police officer. During the attacks, Boelter reportedly wore a realistic latex mask, a tactical vest, and a fake badge, and drove a vehicle equipped with police-style emergency lights. Possible motives and the manifesto. While authorities stated it was far too early to confirm a motive, the discovery of a manifesto and a target list in Boelter's vehicle pointed to a politically motivated agenda. The list included prominent Democrats, abortion rights advocates, and abortion providers, suggesting a focus on progressive political figures and causes. The "No Kings" flyers found in the vehicle raised questions about a possible ideological stance, though no direct link to the planned protests was established. The phrase, "No Kings," could imply an anti-authoritarian or anti-establishment sentiment, but without access to the manifesto's contents, this remains speculative. Boelter's prior text messages to roommates, stating, "I may be dead soon," hinted at premeditation and a willingness to face severe consequences, possibly indicating a suicidal or martyrdom-driven mindset. However, the lack of detailed public information about the manifesto limits understanding of his precise motivations. The overlap with Hoffman on the workforce board suggests a potential personal or professional grievance, but police were unable to confirm a direct relationship. Official and public response. Governor Tim Walz and state leaders. Governor Tim Walz, a close friend of Melissa Hortman, was visibly shaken as he addressed the public during a press conference on June 14. He described the attacks as a politically motivated assassination and a dark day for Minnesota and for democracy. Walz ordered flags at state buildings to be flown at half-staff in Hortman's honor and activated the State Emergency Operations Center to support law enforcement efforts. He emphasized Minnesota's commitment to civil discourse, stating, "We are not a country that settles our differences at gunpoint." Walz also spoke with Vice President J.D. Vance about the incident, highlighting coordination between state and federal authorities. Minnesota's political leaders, including Senator Amy Klobuchar and Representative Tom Emmer, issued a joint statement condemning the violence and expressing grief for the Hortman family while praying for the Hoffman's recovery. Federal response and condemnations. President Donald Trump condemned the shootings, calling them a targeted attack against state lawmakers, and pledging that the FBI, led by Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Director Dan Bongino, would investigate and prosecute those responsible to the fullest extent of the law. The FBI's involvement, including the $50,000 reward and Boelter's addition to the most wanted list, underscored the national significance of the case. Former Vice President Al Gore, for whom Hortman briefly worked as an intern, paid tribute to her, noting her lasting impact despite her short tenure in his office. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband was attacked in a politically motivated incident in 2024, called for an end to the climate of politically motivated violence. Gabrielle Giffords, a former Congresswoman who survived a 2011 assassination attempt, stated, "An attack against lawmakers is an attack on American democracy itself." Community and political reactions. The shooting sent shockwaves through Minnesota's tight-knit political community. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey and Mounds View Mayor Zach Lindstrom expressed solidarity with the victims' families and condemned the violence. House Speaker Lisa DeMuth, a Republican who succeeded Hortman under a power-sharing agreement in 2025, called the attacks evil and urged prayers for the victims and law enforcement. Posts on X reflected a mix of grief, outrage, and speculation. Some users, like at Holzman, suggested the attack specifically targeted Democrats, while others, like at Zigaflint2, questioned how Walz could immediately label the shootings as politically motivated, hinting at the possibility of a manifesto. These posts, while not conclusive, captured the public's immediate reaction and the polarized sentiment surrounding the incident. Broader context: political violence in the United States. A rising tide of threats. The attacks on Hortman and Hoffman are part of a disturbing trend of political violence in the U.S. Recent years have seen an increase in threats against elected officials, fueled by polarized rhetoric and societal tensions. Notable incidents include Gabby Giffords, 2011. The former Congresswoman was shot during a public event in Arizona, an attack that killed 6 and injured 12. Her statement on the Minnesota shootings highlighted the ongoing threat to public servants. Nancy Pelosi's husband, 2024. Paul Pelosi was attacked in a politically motivated break-in at their home, underscoring the vulnerability of politicians' families. January 6, 2021, Capitol riot. The violent attempt to overturn the 2020 election results demonstrated the potential for political ideologies to escalate into violence. Hortman herself had expressed concerns about her safety on the campaign trail as political rhetoric grew more acrimonious in Minnesota, according to a colleague. The evenly split Minnesota House and slim Democratic majority in the Senate created a contentious legislative environment, potentially exacerbating tensions. The role of impersonation and deception. Boelter's use of a fake police uniform, badge, and vehicle highlights a sophisticated level of planning and raises concerns about the abuse of authority symbols. By exploiting the trust associated with law enforcement, the suspect was able to gain access to the victims' homes, a tactic that has prompted police to warn residents to verify the identity of officers at their doors. This incident echoes other cases where impersonation has been used to facilitate crimes, underscoring the need for public awareness and law enforcement protocols to address such threats. The "No Kings" connection. The discovery of "No Kings" flyers in Boelter's vehicle has sparked speculation about an ideological motive, though authorities have not confirmed a direct link to the protests. The phrase could suggest an anti-establishment or anti-authoritarian stance, potentially aligned with broader political movements. However, without the manifesto's contents, it's unclear whether this was a central theme or a peripheral element of the suspect's motivations. The cancellation of the protests reflects the heightened fear and uncertainty following the attacks, investigation and ongoing manhunt. Law enforcement efforts. As of June 15, 2025, Vance Boelter remains at large, with the manhunt extending beyond Minnesota. The FBI, BCA, and other agencies are following leads, including a search warrant executed at a home near 49th and Fremont in Minneapolis. Several individuals have been detained and questioned, but no arrests have been confirmed. The recovery of AK-style firearms from Boelter's vehicle and the belief that he remains armed with a pistol have heightened the urgency of the search. The investigation is exploring several angles. Boelter's connection to victims. Authorities are examining whether Boelter had personal or professional interactions with Hortman or Hoffman beyond their shared service on the workforce board. Motive and ideology. The manifesto and target list are being analyzed for clues about Boelter's ideological leanings and specific grievances. The inclusion of abortion rights advocates suggests a possible focus on reproductive rights debates, which have been highly contentious in recent years. Operational planning. Boelter's use of a latex mask, police impersonation, and modified vehicle indicate significant preparation, raising questions about whether he acted alone or had assistance. Challenges and public safety concerns. The suspect's escape on foot after exchanging gunfire with police suggests agility and familiarity with the area, complicating the manhunt. The lifting of the shelter-in-place order in Brooklyn Park was based on the belief that Boelter had fled, but the lack of a confirmed location keeps communities on edge. Authorities have urged residents to report suspicious activity, particularly involving individuals impersonating law enforcement, and have advised that legitimate officers are working in pairs for verification, critical analysis and implications, examining the narrative. While the sources unanimously described the shootings as politically motivated, the immediate labeling of the attacks as such by Governor Walz, as noted by some ex-users, raises questions about the evidence available at the time. The discovery of a manifesto and target list supports this characterization, but the lack of public disclosure about its contents leaves room for skepticism about the precise nature of the motivation. Was Boelter driven by a specific ideological agenda, a personal grudge, or a combination of factors? The overlap with Hoffman on the workforce board suggests a possible personal connection, but without further details, this remains speculative. That no kings, flyers and the cancellation of related protests also warrant scrutiny. While authorities acted cautiously, the absence of a confirmed link between the flyers and the protests suggests a potential overreaction, possibly driven by the need to reassure the public. This highlights the challenge of balancing transparency with public safety in high-profile investigations. Broader implications for democracy. The attacks on Hortman and Hoffman underscore the vulnerability of elected officials in an era of heightened political polarization. The targeting of Democrats, combined with the inclusion of abortion rights advocates on the suspects list, suggests that progressive policies may be flashpoints for violence. However, as Senator Amy Klobuchar noted, condemning violence of all ideologies is critical to preventing further escalation. The incident also raises questions about the adequacy of security for state lawmakers, who often lack the protections afforded to federal officials. The impersonation of a police officer adds another layer of concern, eroding public trust in law enforcement symbols. This tactic could inspire copycat attacks, necessitating stronger measures to verify officer identities and protect against deception. Policy and societal responses. In the wake of the shootings, there are calls for enhanced security for lawmakers. Increased funding for security details and training for state legislators could mitigate risks. Addressing political rhetoric. Leaders across the political spectrum are urged to tone down inflammatory language that may incite violence. Gun control and violence prevention. The recovery of AK-style firearms reignites debates about access to high-powered weapons, though the suspect's status as a former state appointee complicates the narrative around background checks. Community healing. Brooklyn Park Mayor Hollis Winston emphasized unity, promising that the community would come together to overcome fear. Counseling and support services for the victims' families and affected residents are likely to be prioritized. Conclusion. The tragic shootings of Melissa Hortman, Mark Hortman, John Hoffman, and Yvette Hoffman on June 14, 2025, represent a devastating blow to Minnesota's political community and a stark reminder of the dangers facing public servants. Melissa Hortman's legacy as a dedicated leader, advocate for progressive causes, and beloved colleague will endure, while John Hoffman's survival offers hope for recovery and resilience. The ongoing manhunt for Vance Luther Boelter, a suspect with ties to Minnesota's political landscape, underscores the urgency of addressing political violence and its root causes. As the investigation continues, questions remain about Boelter's motives, the contents of his manifesto, and the broader implications for democratic institutions. The incident has galvanized leaders and citizens to condemn violence, strengthen security, and foster civil discourse. In the words of Governor Walz, Minnesota is strengthened by civil public